Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. I cannot believe that it's already been 6 weeks from the Portfolio Power Up series. And I've been talking with so many people in the last 6 weeks. And today I'm super excited to do more like a one-on-one interview. So there's going to be a lot of questions. My name is Juliet, and I'm super excited to have you here. If you are watching us through LinkedIn, or if you're watching us to YouTube, or you ended up here because ADP list, make sure that you add in your questions on the comments. Again, I have a lot of questions, but I want to make it interactive. So make sure that you're dropping your questions right away on the comments. Before I bring Juan, I just want to give you a shout out for next Saturday. We are closing up our portfolio Power Up series with a case study presentation from some of the participants. They're going to be doing a 10-15 minutes presentation, and we are going to give them feedback right away. They're going to be I hope so, implementing everything that we have learned in the last 6 weeks. So about branding, strengths, how to show off their skills, about storytelling. So it's going to be super powerful, and I'm going to be telling you the next dates for next year. A lot of people have been asking, when is the next version, the second version of the Portfolio Power Up? So stay tuned next week for the dates. Okay, let's bring our guest speaker. I feel like this is what everybody's been waiting for. Hello, Juan. How are you? Nice to have you here.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm doing really well.
Yeah,
Early Saturday morning.
I know we are in Vancouver, so we are early birds to have you all over here. So I'm super excited. I feel like everybody's been waiting a lot for this talk, because at the end of the day, what we want with our portfolio is making sure that recruiters are opening, liking it, and calling us. So that's what we have you today. But before we start with the juicy information that you're going to give us, why don't you tell us about a little bit about yourself and an interesting fact?
Yeah, I'm Juan, originally from Mexico. I've been in Canada for over 14 years. I think, like everyone in recruitment, nobody goes to school to be a recruiter or anything like that. It's everybody kind of falls into it. So that's kind of what happened to me. Been in the industry for almost 10 years now. Fun fact, I love soccer, and I actually lived in the States when I was young.
Mm. I mean, who doesn't like soccer if you are Latino from Latinx? But a fun fact about you that I love, and I feel like this is something that you mentioned right when we met, is like your name is Juan Valdez. And if
That's
you
true.
if you know, maybe people don't know, but I'm Colombian, and Juan Valdez is like a trademark in coffee. And if you haven't seen it, it's like how you get a farmer, a coffee farmer with a little donkey that goes around the world promoting
Yeah.
coffee. Do you like coffee?
Oh yeah, it's funny that's actually my icebreaker always.
Yes.
Not a lot of people, not a lot of younger people know about that though.
Okay, so for all of you that are watching, make sure that you're Googling Juan Valdez, and then you
Yeah,
will see the coffee farmer with a little donkey going around the world promoting Colombian coffee. If you haven't had Colombian coffee, you're
that's it.
missing out. Yes. Okay. So I know that you told us already a little bit about how did you started in recruiting, but did you start in tech recruiting, and how did you ended up here?
Yeah, I started in tech recruiting. I mean, I've been mostly specialized in the tech space, different things, engineering, product, data. I started working with like large enterprises, mostly on like contract recruits. And I started my own company 3 years ago, and I started focusing more on the startup side and helping like seed to Series A companies kind of hire top talent. And that's kind of how I ended up here. But yeah, it's been a journey over 8 years, and I kind of fell into it. I really liked it. I love talking to people, learning what they do, how they do it, what makes them passionate about it. And on the same side with clients, it's like I get to learn the underbelly of every organization and really understand what's going on. And I like to be that bridge between the both and help mitigate
Love it. I mean, you're already jumping into my
that.
next question. It's like that's okay. But what have been the most rewarding and challenging aspects about working in the tech recruitment space?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most rewarding is really, I'll give you a story. I had an immigrant in this Latinx group that I created that, he'd been looking for a job for like a year and a half, and I've been like helping him with his, resume, portfolio, everything, and he struggled for a while to find a job, and then he calls me and he's like, hey, I was about to move back home, and then I found the job that I wanted, and it took a long time, and so getting that call, like, to me,
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes it worth it, right? Like when somebody finds kind of that opportunity that they're looking for, it gives you that sense of you were a small piece of that, and I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I feel like, again, for me as a mentor, that's one of the most exciting parts when we go to portfolio reviews and when we're talking a lot about branding and strengths. And they go to an interview and he's like, and they come back, it's like, I got the job. It's like, yes. I feel like it's more exciting. I mean, again, I'm not a
Yeah,
recruiter, but just empowering people and getting
yeah,
positive outcomes. Even if people don't get the job, at the end of the day, people is seeing their value, their strengths, and how good they are. I feel like that's a big piece of all of this.
totally.
Now let's talk about the challenging aspects of the tech recruitment.
I mean, it's a hard job, right? You're dealing with people. You're managing both sides, clients' expectation, candidates' expectations. Sometimes you get obviously a ton of people that you're talking to. Not everyone can get the job. You have to deliver bad news. You have to kind of tell somebody, hey, it's not the right fit, even though they're a great candidate. So that's challenging, right? Like dealing with people, I think ultimately it's one of the
Mhm.
the hardest things, and giving feedback and knowing that you're not going to be able to help everyone out. And so I mean, that's kind of why I like to do these kind of things, because that way you can kind of reach more people than just the ultimate
Love
impact
it.
of getting a job, right?
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. And I mean, again, I imagine this question will come up at some point. And again, if you just join us, make sure that you put in the questions on the comments. I do have a list, but I would love as many questions from all our viewers as we can. um that's a question that always comes, is like, oh my goodness, there is a lot of laid off, there is companies closing out, there is no jobs, what do I do? I feel like this is a question that always comes.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk a little bit I know that someone is going to be asking. um Both of us are immigrants, and I feel like you were just telling us a story of like someone that you help that has been looking for a year for a job. How do you make sure that you are inclusive and supporting immigrants in the challenges of, like, again, what is happening
Yeah.
right now with all the hiring around? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, like, I was an immigrant, and I leaned on a lot of mentors, a lot of people when I first came here to be able to get a job. And I wanted to give something back and see how I could help. I think the biggest challenge is, a lot of immigrants come here, whether it's they're told something about school or told something about how easy it is to get a job afterwards. And then a lot of them are faced with the reality of like, oh, this is way more challenging. So I think the
Hmm.
whole, there's not a lot of transparency in any of that process when they come here.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
I think that might be the biggest thing. Their expectations are, I'm gonna get out, I'm gonna get this job, I'm gonna make this much money, and clouding
Hmm.
those expectations makes it very difficult, right? So I think just the transparency piece is definitely missing, especially in this community, and just
Hmm.
helping people understand what it's like, right? Like, look, in our countries, things are done in a certain way. Here, things are done in a different way, and the faster that you
Hmm.
can adapt, the faster that you can kind of immerse yourself into the culture. I think that's the biggest piece, right?
Hmm.
Because I think companies want to give people a chance. Like at the end of the day, there's very talented people that come here. A lot of companies are looking into diversity, inclusion, and how they bring different thoughts into their organization. So they do want to give people a shot. It's just, can you
Hmm.
adapt to this culture to show that that you could be a part of this, because it is a very different work culture in different countries, right? And I think that's the
Definitely.
adapting piece is the hardest.
And I feel like this is a great way to move into our next question, is what advice would you give to job seekers who are just starting out in the tech industry, especially those that are from underrepresented backgrounds. And I love what you were mentioning about transparency, because, and I mean, again, maybe 5 years ago, the tech space to finding a job, even 5, 7, it was a little bit different. It was a little bit easier because
Yeah.
there were not that many people specialized on the space. So of course, it was a little bit easier to find a job. But now, because I mean, it's a great space to work. There is a lot of great benefits. There is a lot of space to grow.
Yeah.
So people moving to tech. So now, of course, the market is a little bit tight. There is a little more people coming from outside, people from the inside,
Yeah.
uh, companies looking to hire people out of the country because it's better for them.
Yeah.
So what is your advice for people
Yeah.
entering into tech?
Yeah. I think, yeah, for sure. I think it's one of the, I mean, in almost 10 years of this has been the hardest market I've ever kind of been a part of. So I think, first of all, like, to tell people, it's sometimes it's really not you, it's the market. If you're getting rejected, if this is what's going on, it's a situation in the market. Like, I talk to, internal recruiters that they'll throw a job posting up and within 2 hours there's 70, 80 candidates. And then they have to kind of shut it down because there's too many, right? I think what's not helping the problem is that people don't really look at the opportunities that they're applying to. They think, I'm going to get rejected by a ton of people, so I'm just going to apply to every little thing possible. And that's actually hurting them, right? So I
Mhm.
would say, take time, first of all, to network, to join communities. I think that's the biggest piece. Network, join communities, find mentors, and really figure out, hey, this person works here. How can I leverage them for an introduction somewhere? How can I add value to them so that they feel comfortable introducing me, right? Because it's it's also,
Mhm.
when you work at a company, you're not just going to refer everyone, because it's your reputation as well. And if you don't know that person, you need to feel very comfortable in order to be able to refer. So what can you do from that, right? Like, how do you go invite them for a coffee, you know get them to get to know you first as a person, what you could do, what kind of value, and then ask for an introduction. So I would say those are the things that really will help you differentiate yourself today versus
Mhm.
applying. Because I think, if you're spending your time just applying, a lot of people are having a hard time with that right now. There's just too many people applying and mass applying, right? This whole LinkedIn easy apply feature has made it very difficult and very challenging, because it's very easy to apply. And people think,
Mhm.
oh, this is better. But in reality, it's not, because, you go on LinkedIn and you see there's 300 people that applied. The truth is, it's actually not 300 people. It's 300 people that clicked that button, but maybe
Yes.
they didn't apply. So then you're
Mhm.
seeing that there's all these applicants in that position, and you're maybe discouraged to go from there because you
Mhm.
think there's too many already. So
I'm
I'd say,
already too late for the game. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So I think the biggest thing is just like, I would say, go back to the basics and keep it simple, right? And like, really find opportunities to network, join communities, find mentors. Like, that will always be the best and easiest way to
Mhm.
to find a job and to break into the industry.
And I feel like I love this part, and is again, I feel like if you're making friends, let's say that Juan, I haven't met you in my life, and then I
Hmm.
come to you and I know that I want to make friends. I wouldn't say, hey Juan, I need $1,000 for my rent. You're not
That's
going
it.
to give me $1,000 because you are not my friend. You don't know me. So I don't know when
Yeah.
that relationship, even if it's networking and it's in a professional space, why I would come to you and you said, give me a job, is kind of the
Yeah.
same space. And we want to build trust. We want to build, like,
Totally.
you know me, you know who I am, you know my strengths, you know how to guide me into a more specific job. Is not
Yeah.
just give me a job because you are a recruiter.
That's it. And I get so many messages every day. So many. And all it is, most people just send me their resume and say, "Can you help me find a job?" And
Yes.
as much as you want to help a ton of people, it just doesn't, like, write a message, say, "Look, I noticed, you're recruiting for, say it's an internal recruiter. I noticed you're hiring a UX designer and it's in the e-commerce space. write a quick message. Hey, look, I worked on this e-commerce project. This is what I did. Would love to just show you my portfolio, show you some background. Would love to get to know what the company's looking for, learn a little bit more, right? Like just use it as an open intro versus like you said,
Mhm.
hey, here's my resume. Um, I
Hire
want this
me.
job, right? So it
Yes. And oh, sorry, did I cut you?
no, go for it.
No, I was going to say, like, again, any relationship takes time. Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
my best friend is not my best friend because, yeah, we click, but this relationship takes time. So
yeah,
doesn't mean because we just meeting today, uh, that this relationship is not going to grow into a year when you have seen a little more of my work in LinkedIn, when you have seen what I have done in
totally.
the past. And I feel like people miss this part. And I mean, I'm going away a little bit from the questions, but how do you build these long lasting relationships with recruiters or with like hiring managers?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. I think at the end of the day, it's like consistency, communication, and it's approaching it from a, hey, I'd love to learn, what type of clients you work with. This is my experience. How can I help you help me kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
And but a lot of this, like I meet a ton of people at like I go to like a ton of networking events in Vancouver, and there's a ton of meetups. The easiest way to meet someone like me or other recruiters out there, they're at all of these events, right? So
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it's just so much easier to approach somebody when you're having a coffee, when you're having a beer, and
Mhm.
saying like, "Hey, I would love to learn about the market.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the market?" Like the same questions that we're asking here. Like at the end of the day, hey, I
Mhm.
see that you're doing this with immigrants. Like I would love your thoughts on that. So there's so many different ways to. Oh, my you just kicked in. Uh, there's so many different ways to initiate that contact versus the transactional way of, hey, help me get a job. I think at the end of the day, that's the
Mhm.
biggest challenge, right?
And I feel like this go a lot to when you were talking about that mass application of like then 10,000 jobs
Yeah.
instead of like applying for something that I really care, that it
Hmm.
fits me, that is going to show my strengths, that is going to show how well I'm going to fit in the team. Um, I want to keep talking about this, but a lot of people is asking about
Yeah, yeah.
portfolio. So let's jump into that and
Okay.
then we come back
Cool.
into this.
Yeah, yeah,
But from a recruiter's perspective, how long do you typically spend looking at a portfolio? And
yeah.
what captured your attention in that time?
So portfolios and even resume, like most recruiters, hiring managers look at resumes probably less than a minute, 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Portfolios might be, 1 to 2 minutes. And you're at the end of the day, sometimes you're looking for something super specific because there's very specific requirements, right? So like if I'm working on a product designer role, but it's again with like an e-commerce component, the first thing I'm going to look at in their case studies or in their projects, what have they done in the e-commerce space? Same
Mm-hmm.
if it's like a fintech company, right? Have they ever done anything within that? That's what makes it stand out. And I don't want to jump into other things, but I think the biggest piece is a lot of people focus on how beautiful, how aesthetically pleasing their portfolio is, and they're missing the part that is most important, which is the impact.
Mm-hmm.
What was the business problem? What did you help solve? And what was the impact for
Mm-hmm.
the company? Did you increase, user rates? Did you improve? What did you improve? What was the business impact at the end of the day? That's what we kind of look for because that's what hiring managers are asking of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is what I want. This is the business problem that I'm trying to solve by hire this person. So that's what they want to see in the portfolio at the end of the day.
I feel like you answered this question already, but what are the three things that you can mention that you will look exactly in a portfolio? And
Hmm.
maybe, okay, I'm going to add on something. Is yes, so you have the job description. On
Hmm.
top of that, the job description that you have the requirements that the
Hmm.
company is giving you,
Yeah.
correct? So, how do you match all of this with three things in
Hmm.
the portfolio? Mhm.
Okay. So I would say, well, the most important is like your thought process. So how do you outline it from this was the problem, this is the solution that I came up with, and this was the outcome. It's the same as like when
Mhm.
you're interviewing and you're presenting, the STAR method and all of that, right?
Yep.
Like same thing with your portfolio. I'd say keep it simple, but keep it so where someone understands your thought process and the impact you had on each one of those problems. So that would be the biggest thing, right? Like if I'm looking at a case study, is it relevant to the job description?
Mhm.
And so, from a candidate's perspective, if they're applying to a job and they're looking at that, how can they make their portfolio relevant to that specific role as well, right? They might have projects.
Mhm.
You might not have to, if you have 10 projects, maybe your portfolio shouldn't include all 10 projects. If you're applying
Mhm.
to one role, maybe just include the 3 or 4 that are relevant to that role.
Mhm.
Um, and then I think to tie it all is the impact. So again, what was the problem? What was your thought process? And what was the impact at the end of the day of that specific case study and project, right?
Makes sense. And I feel I'm going to add a soldier's love question here. Yes. Okay. I feel like this could work. How do you protect your design ideas when sharing portfolios? Should be this primary concern starting out. And I feel like this is a tricky one. Uh yes. Hmm.
Do you I think they mean, I know obviously there's if you work for a company, there's not a ton that you can share sometimes, right?
Hmm.
And that's challenging. What I've seen people do is almost create kind of like mock data that is very
Yep.
similar and that
Hmm.
just showcases at the end of the day they're not necessarily looking for your design ideas or what that company did. They're looking at your
Hmm.
thought process. How do you go
Yes.
about solving it and how do you do that?
Hmm.
I think if you can't share specific company data, which is obviously nobody can really, at the end of the day, make it so that it's a similar business problem and you can show that you understood what that meant and that you created impact around it.
And I feel like this is a great question coming up from Coma. That is for internal use products, underperforming products. And I will add here
Hmm.
products that never got released because this
Yeah.
happened many times. How should I still highlight my impact?
Yeah. And that happens a lot,
Yes.
right? That happens a lot. And at the end of the day, it's not your fault if the go to market doesn't work and have that. And I think this, I would just tie it back to what does your portfolio look like? And do you really need to show this? For example, say it was an internal product, underperforming product, but it aligns with the job description because it's very specific. I would still showcase that. And I would say, look, this was all the work that was done. And
Hmm.
the impact necessarily wasn't maybe that it got released, but these are the reasons why. Like again, it's just showcasing the same way that we talk about transparency, I think in the job descriptions and everything, it has to come from this side too, right? And I think more people, it's all about storytelling, right?
Yes.
You can
Yes.
have a failed product, you can have yeah, a project that didn't go well, but if you know how to tell the story around that, it doesn't matter if it was successful or not, right? Like there's little pieces that can add a ton of value to your experience from that.
I love this. And again, I'm glad that you mentioned storytelling because there is no more powerful about who is telling the story and do you believe in the impact, do you believe that you learned
Yeah.
something, do you believe that you went around roadblocks uh, and win. I feel again
Yeah.
that's really powerful. Do you think that impact about productivity on the team or
Hmm.
impact about making the process better is that's an impact that I can show in my portfolio too?
Yeah, I think it is, right? A lot of companies are looking for like to improve their design systems, to improve how they collaborate. And, I think it goes back a lot to reading those job descriptions and what companies are looking for. And if that's one
Hmm.
thing that's very specific, I would say 100%. And especially, I think when people are starting out, right? Like, actually, I don't know if I mentioned this. This is another fun fact. My brother's actually a UX designer, and he actually didn't come from this background. He came from supply chain and operations, and then kind of bought himself into this. And when we were like working at his on his portfolio like a long time ago, it was, how do you show stuff when you're trying to break into the market? And
Yeah.
all he could show was like websites and things like that. I'm like,
Hmm.
look, if that's your experience, that's your experience. You can't. But what I would do would be go on, go and find some sort of, you know, pro bono project, something that
Hmm.
aligns with maybe the type of industry that you want to work in,
Hmm.
and highlight that in your portfolio, I would say.
I want to come back a little bit. Now, oh my goodness, how can I thought comes and in and out like in a second? Oh my goodness, this is interesting. Okay, I think I will come back into this because yeah. Anyway, what common mistakes do candidates make when showing their skills in their portfolios?
I think the biggest one, I was thinking a lot about this question. I think the biggest one might just be adding too many projects and
Hmm.
kind of overloading everything. They want to show everything. And I think that might be, you know, one of the biggest ones. The second one, I would say, again, focusing too much on the visual design, like what it looks like versus the process and problem solving.
Hmm.
And then the third, I would say, a lot of people don't provide a lot of context into what their role within the project actually was. So
Hmm.
really defining, like clearly defining what your role was and what you did versus what the actual scope was.
I love this. Okay, sorry. I feel I should write my questions because then I forget and get excited about stuff. So, one of the things that you mentioned, and I feel like this is where I was going forward when I forgot my question, is having too many cases in a portfolio. And something that you mentioned before is like, let's say that I'm applying for X job. My portfolio should show this. And I feel like this is something that I mention pretty much every single time. Is like the job descriptions say A, B, and C. My
Hmm.
resume, I do my best to show A, B, and C.
Hmm.
And then when I'm sending you to my portfolio, it shows TOP, nothing that match the job description.
Yeah.
So this is something that I've been recommending quite a bit, and that is a portfolio deck that kind of highlights like all the job description versus like a website that is live that has
Yeah.
all my skills, and it's really hard for you as a tech recruiter. Where should I click? Which case study
Yeah.
highlights this person's um, match for this job?
Yeah.
So have you seen job applications that have not a website, but it has like a maybe like a presentation deck, or it has
Yeah.
sometimes even like a Figma file? Yeah.
I think that's actually way better. Like 100%. A lot of people send us their Figma file. They'll send us even like like a PDF presentations with links, and then
Hmm.
you open it up and it shows their Figma portfolio, and they have it all linked to where, you know, it gives you the full presentation of, it's all clickable. Like at the
Hmm.
end of the day, I think what everybody has to remember is keep it simple for the person that's reading it. If it's a lot of work or if
Yeah.
it's not clear, then it might be more challenging for you to be able to help them out. So I think what you're saying is right. Like just keep it, send your organize your portfolio in a Figma, in a pitch deck. And at the end of the day, it's no different than like when a company goes sells its product, you're selling yourself, right?
Yeah.
So put your kind of pitch deck together like that. And I think that goes back also to, if you're able to actually, I have a really good example about this. I sent a portfolio to a client, and it was a Figma file, and the designs and everything from the mock-ups, the wireframes, everything was amazing. But what wasn't was the way it was structured and all the different tabs in Figma. And you know what it
Mm-hmm.
showed? It showed that the person wasn't organized. That's why they didn't hire him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
from a design
Yeah.
system perspective, from all of that, like I think that went back to the thought process. It's like, can this person
Mm-hmm.
design really good things and, you know, make it beautiful, aesthetic, and all that? Yes, but they weren't organized, and that showed in the portfolio. And so
Yes.
ultimately, if you're gonna share your Figma files and everything, like that shows a little bit more about what you can do and what you've done, I think.
Definitely. And I feel like this is usually for like UX designer, product designers, job description, that you know how to use Figma. And if you're sending a Figma file, you need to show that like you know how to do it. I feel like that's really important.
Yeah.
And again, when we think about us as a designer for our portfolio, are we really doing the research? Are we taking in consideration the users when they're using our portfolio? Because that's our
Totally.
job as a designer. So we're getting judged right away in our thinking as a UX designer. So I love that part. Um,
And just to
okay.
add one thing to that,
Yeah.
I think, a lot of companies out there don't really understand, you'll see a ton of postings that say UX UI designer. And so a lot of them they're looking for one over the other, but they're looking for somewhat both. And I think
Mm-hmm.
your portfolio is also a good opportunity if you focus a little bit more on the research piece to
Mm-hmm.
highlight that, to highlight your experience, understanding users, how you go about that. If it's more on the UI, highlight that, right? And if it's both, again, highlight it. But it's just it's another opportunity for you to show, at the end of the day, what your experience is and what you're capable of doing ultimately.
Maybe a question around here. And if again, you mentioned this already about like I know how to do everything, and I want you want to know that I can do every single
Yeah.
process, every single framework. It's overwhelming for you because it's a lot of to read. Is imagine a portfolio or a case study that is 20 pages.
Yeah.
You won't have time to go to 20 pages. And again, is highlighting you as the person who is applying as like you didn't read the job description, you didn't match your case study or your
Yeah.
portfolio to what we're looking for, and then you're missing the attention of the person who is looking at the portfolio in 2 seconds
Yeah.
because he's not telling the story of matching the job description, the company, to what you have in your portfolio. So I feel like that's such a powerful, again, way to highlight your knowledge
Totally.
into how to present your work.
Totally. I think there's nothing better than when I talk to someone that has done a ton of research about the companies, and I get it, right? Like if you're applying to 100 jobs, you can't do it for all. I understand that. But I think one of the advice I would tell people would be, look, if you want to continue to apply to 100 jobs, that's fine, but maybe pick 5 that you're really interested in and do a
Mm-hmm.
deep dive into those and tailor your portfolio to those 5 and do it that way, like approach it a different way, and I think you'll see different results for sure.
This is an example that I always add kind of in this manner is, let's say that I want to get married. Yes, this is what I'm looking right now in my life. Not because I'm going to get married, I'm going to just date every single person that comes in front of me.
Yeah.
It's not that I have a checklist of things that I want in my partner, and I'm going to forget them because I want to get married. And I feel like people forget this type of relationship, or like again, boundaries and expectations and the
Yeah.
importance of things that you want in life because you want a job. And again, I always, when I say this, I do understand that we need a job for living, that we need a job for like paying our rent, to live. Yes. And then at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I want a job. But then this forgetting about how valuable you are, the strength, the skills, um, and then applying for 1,000 jobs without really looking at matching
Yeah.
is like trying to find again a partner in whoever comes in front of you.
It's so hard. It's so hard, and I think you're right. I think people believe that just doing the same thing over and over again and like just all these applying, it's actually less work. I think it's way more work because then you have to keep up with all
Hmm.
these applications. And I
Hmm.
think just some, maybe if it's not working for you, try this approach, right? Just be super tailored for a couple of months. Like I've had certain situations, like my wife was laid off like a year ago from a company, and yeah, like helping her and seeing the job market from the other perspective. And
Mm-hmm.
it was very, for me, it was very eye opening, right? Like from a lot of things, she didn't get feedback on a lot of opportunities that she applied to.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a few situations. There was one where like she thought she was a perfect candidate for that role. She was rejected by the recruiter and she was upset. And I said, look, we get it wrong sometimes. Write an email to this recruiter and tell them exactly why you think you're a good fit. I
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'll find the email and I'll share it with you if you want to share it. But
Yeah.
the response for the recruiter was like, I shared this with the hiring manager and she was super impressed that she fought for the role.
Mm.
So ultimately, she ended up getting an interview. And it's just one of
Wow.
those like, we get it wrong, right? Like sometimes,
Yeah.
you're looking at all these profiles, but if someone really believes in that they're a good fit, show why. And not just say, hey, I think you're wrong. I think this is a role for me, but
Yes.
I've done this, this, and that. This is how I can add value. And I think ultimately, like for her, like, I think she found a job like in a month and a half after that. And I think we
Wow.
only applied for like 10 roles. But a lot of it was every single application took time. And it took time to research the company. It took time to know who the hiring
Mm-hmm.
manager is, who she could leverage for a referral. Like it was just a very,
Yeah.
very different approach.
Yeah.
And like you said, everybody, obviously you need a job and you need to make it work. But I think slowing down and doing it this way might
Mm-hmm.
actually get you better results than just throwing a bunch of stuff out there and seeing what sticks.
Yes, love it. And I feel like I have a question. Sorry, I know that people is asking question. I'm trying to fit them into what we're talking about, so that's why it's not that I'm skipping anyone's questions. I'm trying to fit them into our conversation. But that was something here from Benjamin. Yes. Okay. Yes. And I feel like this is a good one. So it is a good practice to ask recruiters hiring team for feedback on why an application was rejected, even though most of the times you may not get feedback. And again, I feel like this comes back to what we were talking at the beginning. You are receiving 300
Yeah,
applications. So I feel like at one point it's hard to give feedback to 300, 200 people.
it
But
is.
when do we ask for feedback? And
Yeah.
yes,
I think
how
if
to ask for
you
feedback?
I think if you make it past like the initial stages, you deserve some feedback. If you interviewed with somebody, you deserve. Yeah, sometimes it's very hard to give specific feedback, especially because I think a lot of times, recruiters are relying on hiring managers, and if we don't get that feedback, then we can't pass on that feedback too. But even
Mm-hmm.
from the hiring teams, like I would say, like it's always good to get to ask for the feedback, and you can say, look, I'm trying to improve. My next application, I want to know,
Mm-hmm.
you know what you really thought about this. You can ask for it. Whether you'll get it or not might be a different challenge. I think that all comes down to the recruiter. That comes down to the how more and more companies nowadays are focusing a lot on the candidate experience, and I know that this is one of them, right? And there's a lot of like AI tools coming out where you can do a lot of this, right? It helps you
Mm-hmm.
create a better candidate experience. So I think this will get better as time comes, but there's nothing wrong with asking for it. And I think if you made it past the initial screening, you can ask it. If you submit an application and you don't get any feedback, it might be really hard, right, to ask for it.
Yeah.
But if you've interviewed, I think that it makes it a little bit easier.
And I feel like something that we can add here is yes, maybe that person for that company won't give you feedback, but can you go to spaces like 80 pillars and kind of like, hey, mentor, I have this
Hmm.
description. I applied for this job. What do you think that I didn't get a call? So I feel like
Yeah.
trying to get feedback in different spaces that will help you too. And honestly, sometimes what can happen is, and I feel like I was listening to these sometime again, 400 people apply. Let's say that you make it to the short list, and someone in that short list has a referral. I mean, that's maybe going to beat you, and maybe you will never make it to the other side. So
Yeah.
there could be so many whys in between that maybe that's why there is not a feedback, because there is nothing much to give it from.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what happens, to be honest, most of the time. A lot of jobs get filled in a certain way that there's just not much. You could be it sucks to be kind of like that second candidate that was so close to getting an offer, and
Hmm.
like, I think it goes back to the transparency and all of that piece in terms of, for me, I want to build long-term relationships. So I try to give feedback as much as possible with the candidates that, I've reached out to, I've put in a process, and I push hiring managers for feedback when it comes to that. But yeah, there's many times where it's just like, look, great candidate. There was just somebody else who was better
Yeah.
for this role,
Hmm.
and ultimately that's it.
And sometimes, and I say, like, if you're in a team and you have already, I'm going to put example of designers because that's who I am, and the team of the designers is like four designers, and they want to bring one more person they're trying to fit for the skills that we're missing out of, for something different. So it's not that you are not good enough and that your work is not
Yeah.
good enough. You're simply not matching the vibe that they are looking for in
Yeah.
the team. So I feel
Totally.
like it could be so many different things. Okay, something that we have talked a lot into the 6 weeks as something that one of the guest speakers, Natalia, talked about is, and you mentioned this already a little bit, is the portfolio highlighting, there you go, highlighting the skills of the different projects depending of what you're applying. So if you're applying to a startup versus an enterprise, an agency, how does your portfolio need to match to the job description? Even though we have said this already, but I'm going to
Yeah.
ask it again.
I mean, I think for startups, like, they want to know that you're someone that can wear multiple hats, so that you handle ambiguity, right? That you can move quickly. So those are the things that I would highlight. It's like, hey, you can adapt to change quick, you can move quick, and
Mm-hmm.
you can wear multiple hats. That's how I would focus my portfolio if I'm working for a startup, because that's the reality, and it depends on the stage of the startup. But startups are very picky, and part of the reason is because they move super quick and they want someone that
Mm-hmm.
hits the ground running and that can do it. So showcase that in the portfolio. If you're applying to larger mid-market enterprise companies, is I think that the biggest thing that you can do there is, how can you highlight a specific area? Because what happens if you work at a large company that has a design team of 15 people, you're likely going to be focused on one specific area, and they're hiring
Mm-hmm.
you for one
Mm-hmm.
specific area. So that's where you really highlight the industry, the whatever your portfolio shows that you can do that. They also want to know, how do you work with structured teams, how do you work with
Mm-hmm.
design systems, right? What's your ability to scale solutions? Because usually at an enterprise level, you can have worked at smaller companies and never scaled to something. So they want to know, what have you done that has scaled, and how have you kind of managed that? So I think the easiest way would just be, one's very structured, one is more so showcasing your ability to adapt and change.
Mm-hmm. Love this. And I feel like what you were talking is all the words that you're using that match again for what the company is looking is really important for you. Is like, again, you're scanning. I feel like, I mean, at this time, of course, you're already like a pro of like scanning
Yeah,
portfolios
yeah,
and resume of matching. I imagine you like
yeah.
like matching words as you go from one side to another, like they just pop out of the
Yeah,
screen.
yeah,
And I feel like it's really important for us to remember again who is the user and who is looking at our, again, portfolio and resume, and how we're matching those for you to say, oh my goodness, this person is saying all the things that are the job description and what the company is looking for.
And you know what's happening right now with AI, like ChatGPT, is that everybody's filling their resumes and everything with keywords, and so that's becoming a challenge now, right? And so I think, you know your portfolio would actually make it a lot easier to stand out, because yeah, like, everybody, like, you look at a resume today, everybody has all the keywords in the job
Yeah.
description because they match it. So now it's like, but you could tell right away which one shows impact, which one shows,
Mhm.
that key piece that is not written necessarily by AI.
Oh, it's tough. We were just talking about AI before we were meeting for this, so it's super interesting again. And maybe no one have asked this question yet. Like, so how is the impact of AI right now in the tech recruiter space and in the job market?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of companies out there trying to create solutions to improve the process, both on the candidate side, on the client side. I think it's obviously it's not there yet. And actually, I'll address this. I get asked this a ton. Everybody thinks that the whole ATS systems and
Yes, yes.
it's all AI. And at the end of the day, it's not. It's still someone looking at your
Mhm,
profile. It's just when you get 100 applicants, it does kind of help you filter through which ones have more experience based on
mhm.
some questions and parameters that you can put in there. But ultimately, there is someone behind this looking at your resume. So just for everyone that thinks that they're just putting in keywords for an ATS, like there is someone looking at that profile. I think the impact right now is that, for sure, people are just, I think some are overdoing it with ChatGPT,
Mhm,
where they're just giving them, it's like everything. If you learn how to prompt properly, you probably get a great application. If you're doing the basic in terms of like, hey, here's this job description, here is my resume, tailor it to that, we can tell right away like who's kind of doing a lot of that, right? So I'm not saying don't do it, but keep it true to your experience and keep it true to the impact that you've had. Um,
yes.
that would be the biggest piece. Because yeah, I see it a ton. I see it a ton with resumes right now, and I'm like, yeah, there's no way you wrote this. This is pretty crazy. Um,
I love it. Yes. And I feel like this is a good one to go for our work next question, that is like, are there specific red flags in a portfolio that you want, that will make you hesitate to move the candidate forward?
I think I would say, yeah, maybe portfolios that don't really show the process of how you got there,
Hmm.
right? Where you can't really see the thought process or the justification behind kind of what they did. Where it's just
Hmm.
like you look and look and you just don't know how they kind of got to that. You only see the end result.
Hmm.
So because that makes you question, it's like, well, what did they do? Like, or did they do it? Or was it another team member that did that?
Hmm.
I'd say that's a big one. And I think honestly the biggest one is just kind of what you mentioned earlier about, the websites and the portfolio websites and the usability. If I can't navigate through a portfolio, that I
Hmm.
think that's probably the biggest red flag. Because people in design, you should be able to craft an experience where somebody can
Yeah.
use it extremely easy and get a clear picture of what you do from it. So I think that might be the biggest one, is like, do people keep it simple? Do they or am I having an extremely hard time navigating to the portfolio?
I love that. Yes. Again, are you showing the work that you're saying that you do? Because there's a lot of talking and not showing. I feel like that's the
Yeah.
hardest part for sure. Um, okay, I'm trying to go to the questions, but I feel like we have answered tons of this. So if
Hmm.
I've been skipping your question, it's because I feel like we have answered already. Um, mm, yeah, sorry. Okay, so here one from Jillian, and we're coming a little bit from something that you mentioned at the beginning. Is that, do you have any tips for networking and finding communities?
Yeah. There's a ton. Like for example, in Vancouver, I use like Vancouver Tech Journal, Meetup. There's a bunch of events. I would say stick within the events that align to what you want, but also maybe
Mhm,
venture out into more generic tech events. Right? There's a
mhm,
ton of communities like what you're doing. The whole like we launched a community for Latin immigrants, but at the end of the day, there's
mhm,
find something where you feel that you can add value, and then you could just have a beer, have a conversation with anyone because you're
mhm.
passionate about talking about that. Um, but there's a ton of events every day, a ton,
Yeah.
a ton of events.
And I will say, and I feel again, I'm talking as a designer. When I talk with some of the other designers, it's like, oh, I just talk to designers. It's like, oh, you are just limiting to a little bubble when you get the chance to go and talk with PM, with developers, with people in market. Like there's so many spaces where you can go and talk about yourself and what you're looking for.
Well, you and I met at a networking event,
Yes, yes, yes,
and it
yes.
wasn't a specific product design event,
Yeah,
right? So
correct.
it was,
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, again, I feel like these, one of the questions that I ask at the beginning, maybe, I don't know when I ask it, is again about those long relationships. Maybe we don't talk every day. Maybe we don't talk, maybe
yeah,
we talk once or twice a year. But again, we have known each other for a while. And one of the first things that we did, we grab a coffee and
yeah,
uh, something easy. We talk about Juan Valdez coffee.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then it's like, things come up afterwards.
You never know. And again, for me, this is an example that I always put about long relationship is the job that I currently have is because of relationship that I have been building for the last 5 years. And again, it was never with the intention of like getting a job. It was
Hmm.
organically and it was naturally. And it just happened to be that I was in the right place at the right moment. But
Yep.
I was doing a lot of background work to get at this point too. So I feel
To
like
get there.
that's
Yeah.
the important part.
100%.
Um, okay. Any more questions? I feel like hold on again. Mm, I feel like we talk about this. Valeria, I feel like we answered already your questions. Let me just show it to make sure. How do I get to work in a certain industry that I haven't worked before, like tech, like health tech? I have experience, but not in this field. And I feel like you answered this question
Mhm.
already, but maybe again we can give the example again.
Yeah. I think, how can you find, what's transferable between the field that you worked in that can add value to this field, right? Like, there's so many transferable skills between one industry and another. Um, and sometimes that's what companies are looking for. How can you showcase, even if it's a different industry, what problems you've solved in that industry? I think
Mhm.
the challenge right now with the market for sure is that, and I see it with hiring managers and every day, is everybody's looking for a unicorn almost. And
Yes.
it's the nature of it. I will tell people that I'm seeing a huge pickup for 2025, like, because I'm seeing recruiters get hired, which is usually the first sign that companies are starting to build their teams again.
Hmm.
And I think next year's market will be very different than what it's been. This is ultimately, it's been a challenging year, but the more that you can, again, tailor your experience to what they're looking for and show value, or if you're not even in that industry, what kind of pro bono work can you do? What kind of case study can you find that you can work on to
Hmm.
show that you understand that problem at least, or why you want to get into that industry?
Again, this is not a question that I put down. Maybe I don't think so. Now that we're talking about 2025, and this is a question that I usually get a lot from mentees, is like, what skills should I be learning? What else
Mhm.
should I be doing to add on my resume, on my portfolio? What would you recommend?
I would say, like, I'm actually seeing like a ton of stuff with like interaction design.
Hmm.
Um, that's a big one. But I would say, it's funny because obviously the main answer is always like, well, learn how to use AI and couple it. And I think to some extent, for sure, in the future, that will be it. How can you leverage tools out there to become more efficient? I think that's really what a lot of companies are looking for. It's like, how do we improve our efficiency, and can you use certain tools? Like, I don't think, like, AI will replace my job or will replace your job in the next 5 years, but maybe it will help you
Hmm.
become a better version of it. So what can you learn in your field with everything happening with AI that can potentially help you just become more efficient?
Those are skills and maybe like more like hard skills. What about soft skills? What are soft
Mm.
skills that I should be highlighting? Yeah, in my portfolio and my resume.
Yeah, I would say that one is, especially as a designer, just your ability to collaborate. How have you work with? How can you show that that you collaborate, that you work with structured teams? It's a really good point actually. Like cultural fit is probably one of the biggest reasons people get a
Mhm,
job or don't get a
mhm,
job. So
mhm.
can do you understand, again, if you want to work for a startup, do you understand startup life? Do you understand that it requires maybe more hours, that it requires wearing multiple hats, that it requires collaborating in a different way? um just, I think, kind of what you mentioned a lot, learn how to understand who your audience is
Mhm.
and how to tailor your message to them.
Again, I feel like if you have been here with me for the last 6 weeks, with almost, I feel like I got the chance to talk to almost 12 people. That is amazing. Is everybody keep mentioning again the same, like the intentionality about uh, the storytelling that you're saying, the intentionality of researching, like I cannot just show in to say that I like soccer. I don't know who is. I don't even know because I don't know soccer.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
it's like you cannot say that you like soccer and then someone asks you a question and then you're like, got no idea. You need to make sure that you know what you're talking about and then you're doing the research. Otherwise, again, it won't work and you will notice. I feel like people in the other side of the screen, you will notice that you
yeah.
are like making it up.
They do. And I think the other thing outside, it's personal branding is super important.
Hmm.
So being active on LinkedIn, right? Post your portfolio on LinkedIn. Post snippets of what you've done, right? Comment on, go out, UX designers, UX managers on your LinkedIn. Every time they post something, go leave a thoughtful comment about
Hmm.
you, what you think about these things. That's how you stand out, right? It's really just the personal branding, and how can you do
Yeah.
more on LinkedIn to really show that that you're there and that you understand what they're talking about.
Love this. This is a question again. It's not in my question, but how much do you check people's LinkedIn's when people is applying for a job?
Oh, all the time,
Yes.
all the time. So I think I lean more on LinkedIn than anything else. And so if you wanna know, like, just like a quick crash down on LinkedIn, I would say, do you have recommendations? If you don't, go ask for recommendations. And specifically to like where you've worked and for people that you've worked, right? Um, Make sure that your LinkedIn is the same as your resume. It's an easy one, but sometimes I look at a resume and I look at LinkedIn, it has different dates, it has different companies. And some people might say, oh, well, I only worked here for 3 months, so I took it off. That's fine, but take it off from both, because otherwise
Yeah.
it creates a red flag, right? And
Mhm.
but ultimately, I look at, does somebody active? Like a lot of
Yes.
companies, when you asked about what soft skills or what something, one of the ones that's like actually super important is thought leadership. One of the
Hmm.
requirements that you sometimes get from clients, if it's a more senior role, is, are they a thought leader in this space? And how can I validate that? Well, by going on LinkedIn, by seeing what they comment
Hmm.
on, by seeing what they post, by seeing like what their thoughts are, right? Um,
Yeah.
but I would say that's actually one of the biggest ways to stand out today is being active on LinkedIn, adding your network of where you want to work, and just
Hmm.
commenting on stuff that you see, and not just like a quick, hey, I agree, but like leave a thoughtful comment that showcases, what you're capable of doing.
I love this. I feel like when I switched careers, I did almost 10 years on what time it is because I'm like talking. Is this time? Okay, we have any more questions before we go? And I finish my thought. Any more questions? 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It takes some time for people to realize that we're almost leaving. But I work in, oh my goodness. Um, how is these words that I keep forgetting? Retail management. I work in retail management for almost 10 years. So if you go and look at my LinkedIn, it was packed with my previous job, and I think that was one of the hardest part for me at the beginning, to start switching my linking into the interests and the things that I was looking for in the future. So you cannot say, and I feel like this is a hard one too for people that are still in their old job, let's say, and they want to move into something new, is making sure that LinkedIn doesn't look like the present, but it looks like the future. What would you recommend
Totally.
for that? I feel like this is a hard one because they tell me, oh, but I cannot tell my current job that I'm studying this, that I'm
Yeah.
doing this. What do you do?
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's ways around it, because at the end of the day, your LinkedIn and that, it's your brand, it's your personal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of people saying, "Oh, I don't want to post. I don't want my employer to do this." And yeah, for sure, you need to tiptoe your way around that, right? But at the end of the day, it's like, maybe you don't have to change anything on your LinkedIn, but you can start posting things about the topic
Mm-hmm.
that you want to get into, and you can start showcasing, your thoughts on a lot of that. And that isn't, at the end of the day, that's just your opinion. It's not necessarily like, oh, I'm changing my job title, I'm doing this.
Yeah,
It's the same as any other social media, right? Like, you post what you're passionate about and what you want to talk about.
totally.
So that's a
Yeah.
great way to kind of just get into it.
And I feel again, we're coming back to the communities, that if you're building communities outside of LinkedIn and you're being active and you're meeting people, that's a good way to start building who you are and who you want to be in the future and who you want to meet.
Totally.
So, okay, to finish up, this is it. That's it. I'm letting you go, Juan. I have so many questions, but we will do this for version 2 next year, because I feel like even though this is about portfolio, I need you to see my resume, and I need you to want you to go to my portfolio. So I feel like we need to talk a little bit about resume and how to get there. That's for next one. But if
Yeah.
you can leave us with 3 tips or 3 actions that people can take right now to make their portfolio to stand out for tech recruiters, what would you say?
I would say storytelling. Make it tell a story about the problem and the impact. Keep it simple and very easy to navigate, and tailor it to what you want, the job that you want. I would say those are the
Love it.
biggest things.
Thank you so much, Juan. I
Thank
have
you.
so much fun. We didn't even go through all the questions because I just keep skipping
Yeah.
to more. There's so much content. I love what you've been doing. Just keep it transparency and inspiring. Like, again, the Latinx community here in Canada, and just for being present and sharing your knowledge. And again, for everybody, next Saturday, I'm going to show it again before we go. We have our closing event, that is case study showcasing, where we're going to have 3 to 4 participants doing a 10-15 minutes case study presentation. And the cool thing, and I'm hoping that the participants can show their strengths, their storytelling, and how their case study is matching a job description. And we're going to be giving live feedback. Juan, again, enjoy a great
I
one
know.
for today. Thank you so much. Thank you for this. Love to have you here. And again, I'm putting you down for my list for my version 2 next
Yeah,
year.
100%.
So you say
Thank
yes. I
you.
have it in live.
Yeah. No,
Yes.
thank you for having me. It was fun.
Oh, Juan, where can people find you? And last question, what is next for you for 2020? Last question, last question. What is next for you for 2025?
I think 2025 is could be a busy year, and it's gonna be really figuring out, what the changes are gonna be with AI, with recruitment, with everything. But so far, it's shaping up to be a good year.
And I love what you were saying, that companies are finding recruiters, they're finding hiring managers. That means that they want to hire people, and we need to be ready. So that's what we do in the portfolio series, to have a
100%.
portfolio ready for recruiters to open it up and hiring us. That's the
Yeah,
whole goal. And that's the vibes that I'm sending for all of you that are looking for jobs next year. Let's put it in the air. We want to
yeah,
get up better jobs. I love it. Thank you,
100%.
everybody. And thank you for following me for 6 weeks with all my guest speakers. This was great. Thank you, everybody. See you next Saturday.